Welcome to the Builders Podcast, episode 150, and Laffin, Taming Startup Chaos, Messaging, Marketing, and Wrangling Strategies. Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share, if we've earned it. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable from the trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another The Builders. Today, we are joined by Ann Laffin. Welcome to the show, Ann.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So, Ann is going to be talking, you kind of, what do you do, Ann? You're a coach?
I am a marketing consultant. You could call me a fractional head of marketing. I wear a lot of hats myself, but I work with early stage startups and I help them with their marketing.
Nice. So we're going to talk about how she helps these early stage startups and founders and all that wrangle things, get organized, tame the chaos.
Yes.
So
yes.
We're going to talk about that today. But before we get into it, and before we get into, kind of that stuff, when we have somebody on for the first time on The Builders, we like to dig into your story a little bit,
Sure.
How you tamed your own chaos, maybe.
Still working on that, but yeah.
What that journey looked like, how you landed here, and how you became this awesome person you are today, helping people. So with that, I am going to turn it over to you and to tell us your story.
Sure. So I've been working in marketing for over 20 years now, which happened fast. I started in market research, worked for a very large global company, and really enjoyed that experience. It's pretty neat to dive into the psychology around why people buy things, decide things, what they prefer. And it's kind of it's a good foundation for a marketing career, to be perfectly honest with you. And then I made a leap over to financial services. So no background in financial services, but I've spent quite a bit of time now working in fintech, financial services, working with financial advisors, all in marketing though. And did this little flip-flop between market research and financial services for a while until I landed at a startup for financial planning software. And I had never worked at an early stage company like that. I was employee number 6. And I decided I loved it. It was, the wins are fast and the losses are fast, right? Everything is very fast paced. If you need to make a decision or ask the CEO something, you kind of roll over and ask them,
right.
There's not a lot of red tape. And I loved that. Yeah. It was really neat. Yeah. For lack of a better term, it was neat. So 3 years later, pandemic is in full swing, and I had always wanted to start my own company, and it seemed like the right time. Everybody was home. I could start this company virtually, and that's what I did. And so now I work primarily with early stage companies, companies that don't have a ton of resources, right? They may have one marketer, they may have no marketers, and they usually have a lot of, to your point, kind of chaos. They need some wrangling. And
Gotcha.
So that's who I like to work with.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Here we
so
are.
how did you, so you were working, obviously you weren't working at home forever. You were working for other companies and stuff.
Yeah.
What kind of gave you the entrepreneurial bug to go out on your own and do your thing?
I think it's a couple things. One, my dad ran his own business. And he kind of made the comment to me early on. He joked, he's like, I don't think I could be managed by anyone. And whether that's true or not, I watched him run a business and he seemed to enjoy it. I watched, believe it or not, like the flexibility that it provided. He was always at my swim meets and school play, he was always able to fit in his life into his career, or, whichever way you want to flip that around. But, and that always kind of stuck with me. So it had always been in the back of my mind that I wanted to start a business. I just didn't know what.
Gotcha.
And it was kind of the startup piece that was finally like, I think this is it. And it just seemed like the right time. Yeah. I don't know. I just had to kind of, I was ready at that point.
Yeah. So kind of everything led up to that point.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, and then you decided what was the startup doing that you were working for? What kind of business were they in?
They are a financial planning software.
Oh, financial planning software. Okay.
Yep.
And what were you doing there specifically?
I headed up marketing, so strategy, messaging, conferences, PR,
all that stuff.
Content.
You were the whole department.
It was for a very long time. Yes.
No, that's
Yep.
and the founder. What kind of founder did you have there? Was it, out of curiosity, like, was it somebody that was super creative, or were they already kind of really good at business and they knew what they were doing?
Very good at business. Very analytical. Liked the idea of, if we're not failing ever, then we're not trying hard enough type mentality, which I think is really smart. Yeah. And had a lot of really good systems in place, even, by the time I got there, and the company had not been around for very long at that point. So that's a nice environment to walk into, to know that it's like, while there is still chaos, there was some framework on the chaos already in place, which was nice.
That's good. So because we're talking about startups, how do you define a startup? Is just any business, somebody starts a business, it's a startup, or is it a specific flavor of business?
So this is my definition. I don't know how others would define it, right? I do think there's a distinct definition. I'm going to throw small businesses in here, right? A startup, I think, usually is looking to either, bootstrap or get funded by something, whether it's, VC money or grant money, right? They're looking to fund, scale, grow larger, and potentially be purchased. So a startup, I think people tend to think of startups as being very techy. They don't have to be. But in my mind, the difference between a startup and a small business is likely looking to stay small. They may make a lot of revenue, but they're not necessarily looking to bring on 100 employees. Whereas a startup, you might be hoping to have that goal someday, right? It starts small, but that may not be the end goal. So that's, in my mind, kind of the distinction. I'm sure there's a better definition of that, but that's how I see it. I have worked with some small businesses versus startups, and it is a very different, I'm not sure I can even articulate it, to be honest with you. It's a different mindset between the two styles of businesses. So
yeah, I think maybe a business would be more kind of either just focused on their craft and showing up and building this thing that kind of help, it builds some kind of revenue. They get to a point and they kind of get comfortable and they do their thing and they just want it to sustain. They don't have like this grand vision, grand plan for it, or interesting. I always try to think of these things in the context of my own business, like my agency and stuff. And I don't know. I'm sort of. I think I never thought of myself as a startup, but I do have that kind of long-term vision and where I want to do, and I do want to grow, and we are growing. And knock on wood. So far. But yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah. So with that foundation, so what do you think? Now, I mentioned the kind of the differences in founders and stuff. Is that's a key thing, right? That's somebody coming into they're founding a business. You start have a startup. I would imagine and I've worked with other companies and stuff too, with all kinds of personalities, and that's got to really, really impact the success or how chaotic it can get, right?
Yep. What I've learned, for me personally, I like working with founders who are open. They need to be open. And what I mean by that is they're open to feedback. They're open to an opinion that may not be the one that they currently share. They're open to change. And open to sharing ideas. When you have a small team or you're working with a consultant, right? I'm not in your business every day. I don't sit next to you, right? I can't roll over and say, hello, what are we working on? That conversation can't happen as easily. And I think maybe it also shouldn't. there's some beauty in being slightly removed from an organization. You get a different perspective than when you're embedded in it and living and breathing it every day. So for me, working with those founders that are just, they're open to communicating and open to new ideas, open to brainstorming a bit and sharing, that's huge. And that really works for me. And I think it works for the founders that I work with. Founders that are maybe more stuck in their ways or have a very set vision for how they want things to go. Not for me, and I'm not for you.
Just closed-minded. They got their, this is the way they're going to...
Very close.
They might listen to you. Yeah. They might, but then they quickly forget about it.
Yes, they might hear me.
Yeah.
Well, and they may not listen.
Yeah.
So...
interesting. Yeah, I think that's, having built this agency to where it's at today, one of the things that you said that really struck me is the kind of the flexibility. Like you have to be willing to go with the flow and seize new opportunities or let it, because what I envisioned in the beginning, what my business would be, it's very different.
Yeah.
Almost, we're going into the 6th year. It's very different. I had this idea, and where I am today is, it's in the same realm, but right. But I kind of, as the business grew, I started to identify what, certain verticals, certain pain points, certain needs in the marketplace, and I started, well, maybe we should be doing more of that, and I was very fluid with that. I think is that a big part of. Is that important especially for a startup to?
Huge. You nailed it, like 100% nailed it, because so many times, I think especially with a first-time founder, they have an idea, right? They've got this idea and they think they know who wants it or what exactly they're going to do with it. And that's great. It's good to have that hypothesis, but you have to test it, right? So it may be something that the market needs or requires, or it solves a pain point, but it's a little different than how you thought they would use it. So it's really important to be, again, open to that idea, be flexible, and to understand that what your assumptions are may just be that.
Yeah.
You have to, you won't really know until you start, selling the product, asking for feedback, that type of thing. I find that even with my own business, right? Yeah. It's not exactly what I thought it would be, and it's still changing, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to be flexible.
Yeah, you have to be. You're always looking for the next opportunity or the next thing. And I look at my client base, I look at the type of business we do. Like there are certain things, there's certain services where I actually, and I use this example quite a bit, like one of our services, obviously, maybe not obviously, is maintenance. So we have maintenance contracts and with both partners and clients, direct clients. But in the beginning, my idea of what that was super small. It would be really great to be able to, because I like reoccurring income. I've had other businesses with that, and sure. It's a beautiful thing. Nice foundation, makes things good. I'm like, well, a couple $100 a month. Somebody could pay me a couple $100 a month, and I get 10 of those or 20 or 50. It's pretty good.
Yep.
But but then a few years later, I got a contract what was in the thousands for one client, and it changed my whole concept of what was possible. And now I think about it in a completely different light and perspective. Not these little that we can do. We have much more value we're bringing, and there's a type of business out there and we identified that type of business too, right? So, so that was something that I had an idea, but I went with it, and then when an opportunity came, I'm like, then the light bulb goes, turns on, and well, maybe we need to be marketing towards this a little bit more, and kind of shift what we're doing, and I think that bleeds over into the marketing, right? Because you might not even be. I could be talking with somebody and they, suddenly next thing I know, I'm creating a contract for something that I never envisioned. And I'm like, okay, how can we market this? How can we scale this up and do more of this. And maybe we should be moving away from this other idea. I mean, that's what you do. That's what you help with, right? And you take those ideas or are you, so when you're, what do you do specifically for like a startup? Are you you said you're on the sidelines, you're kind of, away a little bit, but you're listening and that they come to you with ideas and you help them execute on those things?
Well, it's funny because even though I am removed in the sense that, I'm not literally, I have other clients, right? I don't just have one client at a time. I am very much embedded. I'm embedded probably as much into my clients as I can be. So I spend a lot of time with them. And the first place I start is actually with messaging. For me, messaging is sort of like the foundation that everything else is built upon. If your messaging is missing the mark, and that's putting it really nicely, it doesn't matter what channels you're using. It doesn't matter what strategy you have in place. It's just not going to land. Your prospects will be confused. Your customers will be confused. So making sure that you really know what value you provide and why you're providing it, how you're providing it, those are really all important. Those are important questions to have answers to. So I like to start there. And then I like to come up with some type of marketing plan. I feel like that sounds ridiculous, but hear me out for a second. So I think even a few years ago, the idea of kind of having this year-long marketing plan was en vogue, right? And the more I work with startups, the more ridiculous I realize that length of plan really is. There's so much change that happens in
just a year,
even just early, and that it's too long. So now I like to break down my plans into either 6 months or 3 months. Something that's smaller that we can, at the end of 3 months evaluate and be like, are we still on the right plan? Do we need to reevaluate this? And I use it as a guide, right? Everybody needs some focus. One of the biggest issues I see with startups is just a lack of focus, a lack of cohesion. And so that plan kind of helps put some guardrails in place of, hey, this is what we're going to work on together. Here's how I'm going to help you. So I start with messaging and a plan, but then I may be working on email creation, copy for the website, content for, I still utilize my jack of all trades mindset because it's what I know. It's what I've had to do for a lot of early stage companies. And quite honestly, they need a lot of jack of all trades, or they need a jack of all trades person early on.
Right.
Eventually, that is not the case. They need some people that can be far more specific to a certain area.
I think that's an interesting point. Yeah. I mean, I think about, as my team has kind of evolved, and at this, obviously when I started, I was the jack of all trades. I was the only one here for a minute.
Oh, yeah.
But when I did look for, if I could find a web developer, designer, or whatever, or somebody that does both, that just as a micro example, I have a couple developers that can also design. That is a beautiful thing, right?
It's handy.
To have both, that's more money. But, so that type of thing, finding somebody with multiple skill sets or could do multiple things for you in the beginning that's a really good thing. And then, like you said, as time goes on, then you can spin off, now I need somebody that's more specialized, or maybe we need to get somebody that's just going to do this for a while. So that really stood out. The messaging too. And that's something that evolves as well, right?
Oh man, that is so true.
I mean, because use myself as an example. So in the beginning, I built websites, right? That was my messaging. But I had to figure out my marketing, eventually I figured out what my, who my audience was, who I was marketing to, and what we were solving specifically. And I tried to this day, kind of for quite a while, a couple of years, we've had pretty much the same kind of messaging around what we do. And that's, it's made all the difference, Yeah. Do you have any examples of somebody that's kind of, you came in and helped them fix their messaging?
I think so. I have a client I'm working with now, and it's been challenging because they changed their product. I promise I'll answer your question, but I feel like I need a little backstory here.
That's great.
So
stories.
They launched.
We're all about stories here.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. This is the story then. So they launched their product. They launched an in-clinic product for a veterinarian during the middle of the pandemic, but the problem was you could barely get into a veterinarian during the pandemic. So selling a tool to be used in the clinic was dicey. So they pivoted and they made an at-home mail-in test that the pet parent could use and then send into the veterinarian. So we had to totally change our messaging. We had to refigure out who our audience was. So we've actually changed our messaging. We've made several pivots over the last few years because I've worked with them for almost since the beginning of my company now. And I think what's been beautiful in this is that idea of assumptions, right? That I was going, like, we had a lot of assumptions. We made a lot of mistakes. And now finally, we have the audience right. We have the messaging right. We're fine. But it took testing. It took trial and error. And it took, at the end, consistency. So I'm all for having to try things out, and I understand why this is a perfect storm of things that happened where we needed to change a lot of things quickly. At some point, you have to get consistent with that message in order to tell if it's actually working. Right. So to answer your question, yes, I feel like now the pieces finally moved into place where we really got clear on who we were talking to and what they needed to hear to understand the benefit. And it's been really exciting, actually.
That's very cool. Yeah, and it's tricky. Like you said, it is trial and error, but you have to give it a chance and see maybe kind of depending on what the context is, how you're marketing, like what the feedback is from that. And
that's the word right there, feedback. You need to ask either customers or prospects, hey, like, what do you think about this? What does this mean to you? Does this resonate with you? You got to get that. Otherwise, you really don't know. Yeah,
right. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean that's kind of what you start with if you're going to help somebody. Let's look at what you're doing and who your audience is, and do you have any? Do you even think about this? Probably some don't probably even think about it. They're just doing their thing.
Or it's piecemeal. So like one thing will say something, one thing will say something else, like it's kind of all, it's like, whoa.
Well, right. There's some alignment there with everything that you're doing. If you have multiple services and things, you have to have, what is that kind of umbrella messaging? Right. So let's define messaging a little bit in terms of, is there what is messaging? Is it, how we're speaking to the whole audience in general, like a theme with all our content, or is it, a snippet of something, like you have on your hero that says, this is our messaging, this is what we do. And that's the messaging, or what? Yep.
I think messaging it's anything you're communicating. And in its simplest term, it's literally any message, any words that are being communicated by the company, that's your messaging. Now you have, let's say, a value proposition, which clearly articulates your unique value to the customer. You might have a mission statement, which is literally like, what are we trying to accomplish as a company? There could have a tagline. So we can break down those words into labels, and those things do have a purpose. But I think in terms of just messaging as a whole, I like to see it as, I'm not going to describe this well. It needs to be in alignment, right? So a value prop, a mission statement, a tagline, or whatever, all those things may have different words, but they all need to at least be kind of marching down the same path.
Gotcha.
They should end up at the same place.
Right. Yep. And kind of, so everything kind of, maybe you have a central idea of what your message is, everything feeds into that. Yes. It complements it around. Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. And so the other thing you help people with, though, going beyond the messaging, so you've solved that. It's awesome.
Yep.
We got it. We nailed it. So what's the next thing? So a marketing plan. So we talk about that, and I've talked to other agencies about their planning.
They're planning.
And somebody was talking to, they're like, you gotta. It isn't that year plan, even though like this time of year, I have the natural tendency, like, what are we doing next year? Or what are we going to do next year? And you have a general idea, but then throughout the year, you have to revisit that plan or tweak it every quarter, or however you want to think about it, like quarter. Some people think monthly, because things move so fast. It depends, like I remember there was an advertising agency that, we partner with, do some stuff for, and she's always like, it's like really quick. She's not thinking at all. Like she'll have a general idea for the year but it's like really down to, because things move so fast and change so fast in her industry or what she's doing. And is that something that's defined? Like, is that a conversation or is that documented? Are there meetings involved? How do you implement that?
Yes to all of the above. Yeah. So again, initially when I start, with a new client, the planning phase is a phase, right? So, we talk about the first piece of it is, what are the goals of the business? Because I can't make a marketing plan if I don't understand where the company is actually trying to go. And even if some of those, even if there's ambiguity around some of the company goals, something for me to kind of latch onto with the marketing plan is key. So we start with business goals. And then we work on, how is marketing going to help, right? How are we contributing? And I think to your point, especially in early stage companies, being flexible with the timeline is key, because as we make this plan in 2 months, all these things could be irrelevant. I don't know, but it could be. Yeah. It's also possible that we try something and something just is killing it. And we realize hey, maybe we need to spend some more time on this. That could be the other thing. So I have moved to a place with clients where I like to plan for either a quarter or at most 6 months at a time. And I think we need to really revisit solidly once a month to be how are we looking? Now, in the midst of all that though, I have weekly status calls with all of my clients. I can't, I'm about as embedded in with them as I could be for someone that doesn't actually work in a company day to day. So, I always have a pulse on what's going on. And I think the biggest challenge for me still is the amount of things that come up that could be added, taking a careful triage of what do we really need to work on? It's easy for the to-do list to become a runaway train. Yeah. So keeping that train on the tracks is still a challenge. If I'm being perfectly honest, I feel like it's just easy to add. It's easy to add more. It's less easy to make sure you're adding the right more.
Well, I mean, that's the whole, a startup. The whole idea was there's ideas. There was a big idea, and that probably the people that work there have more ideas, and they want to keep adding to the pile of ideas, and we want to do everything. And I've been involved with some people in the past that have started a lot of things and never finished them, or big ideas, and it took away from, and maybe eventually they get focused on the right things, but in the meantime it's chaos, and they're taking resources away from things they should be doing. That is a whole thing in terms of in the importance of it, because I mean, I have lots of ideas. There's things, but there's some ideas I've had to let go, because of the opportunities that are actually presenting themselves and where you go. I mean, I think one of the things that I struggle with, I don't know if it's a struggle, I think about a lot, is if we're doing really, really well, and in a certain area, I don't like that. I get uncomfortable. I feel like I have all my eggs in one basket. I never want to have that. I want to have be diversified. I feel more stable that way, and I've done a pretty good job of that. But sometimes I feel like I'm getting too much into this. I should be doing something else, and that's got to be one of those decisions too, right? I mean, it's you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, but at the same time, you don't want to put too many ideas in there either. So you want to capitalize on what you got going. Make sure you optimize for that and get as much out of it as you can. But at the same time, those other ideas, maybe they can wait. Maybe you have to make those decisions or whatever.
I've been doing a lot of reading. This is the time of year everybody's planning, right? And, one of the ideas to kind of, if you're trying to sell into, let's say, a CEO, how you want to spend your marketing budget for the year. And one of the thoughts is that, you need your kind of quote unquote bread and butter ideas, tactics that at least have worked in the past, that the CEO is comfortable with. It's important to have those things in there. But it's also important to set aside budget, for lack of a better term, to play or experiment is really a better way to put that. And so I think to your point, if you have something that's going really, really well, you don't want to suddenly just blow that up and be like, we're not doing that anymore. Like, that would be silly, right? But it would also be silly to think that that one thing will always only ever be the one thing. And if you don't plan for what could be the second thing, you could run into trouble down the line. And I think that really applies with marketing as a whole. I've definitely seen tactics, right? Like, I'm thinking of when I had a client where webinars were we were killing it with webinars for a while until we weren't.
Yeah.
And then what?
Right.
So you have to have, you'd have to be testing out some other things, and you have to realize that also it's still a test. It may not work, but if you never test anything, you won't know if it's a possibility for long-term success.
You kind of like, what one trick pony, this is the only thing you know how to do. And I've actually just learned of something of a company I know that are struggling. And I feel like that was their problem, because they lost some salespeople and there's a lot of trouble there. But they had the founder, the owner, the person in charge just wanted to do this one thing. He kept gravitating. And I know somebody that's been trying to get him to do other things. And he listens, and then he doesn't. And he goes back to the other thing. And they're really, really struggling. But that was one of those situations where I think he found the model. He's very comfortable doing it this way. But he never found other things to do because what if that doesn't work someday, or those people leave, or something happens, and you got to kind of have those contingency plans, those backup plans. I think about that with what I do. We're kind of diverse, and there's certain things that we do. We show up every day. This is our baseline, but even like SEO, I'm thinking about investing in SEO. It's been really difficult though to allot that money to it or the resources. I'm like, it would be good to also do this, because now, if we can generate something there, then we have that to fall back on if something, stops working over here.
Goes awry.
Yeah. So what other things? So you got, the messaging, kind of wrangling the plan. Is there anything else that is common for startups to struggle with in terms of that generates that chaos that you have to wrangle?
I think there's also typically a lot of chaos in these organizations, and mostly because people are still wearing a lot of hats. So there's frequently, I see, not a ton of clarity around the roles people are supposed to be performing. Right? There may be a job description, there might not be. So there's a lot of gray in startups. And I think if you work well with ambiguity, that can be a really beautiful thing. But I also think there comes a point where that ambiguity has to get cleared up and has to be more defined so that people can be satisfied in what they're doing every day. So again, I've worked with enough startups, and now I can kind of offer perspective as to what I see happening. And again, I'm one layer removed, so often I can kind of see what's happening in the organization that maybe it's harder to see if you're embedded in it. And happy to offer that suggestion for them. Startups, I feel like, are just a living, breathing entity. They're constantly changing, and it's what makes it exciting and fun. It can also make it, chaotic and frustrating. I think all those things are wrapped up in a nice wrangled bow.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But and you mentioned people. I mean, people is an important part of. Do you think? And I think about my team as it's developed and grown, and there's certain people I've hired for a certain reason, and eventually they're doing something completely different. Maybe because they're better at that other thing, or because we just changed and we need help in this other area, or and so that is having that flexibility. I mean, has been really important for me. But when a startup. Most startups you worked with, have they kind of nailed it right out of the gates and hired just the right people and got it right? Or is that a really big thing that causes chaos and having to, hire, fire, are people good at doing that? Or is that something you have to coach them on or help them with?
I mean, the idea of firing fast is something that I hear a lot of, and I think there is some value to that. Particularly, when resources are strapped, you don't want to be hanging on to somebody for a long time. That's just not adding any value. But I do also think it's important, we were talking about messaging earlier and even just communication. Being able to communicate well with your staff to make sure that they understand what they're supposed to be doing, why they're supposed to be doing it, who's doing it, and that the rest of the organization knows, I think actually could also go a long way to making sure people are performing well, right? So while I think fire fast is key, I wonder a lot, did people actually know what they were supposed to be doing? Was everyone on the same page? Because that's the theme I find most often is that the answer is no. People are not on the same page. And if you don't work well in gray, you're not going to work well at all.
Yeah, I think for me, and maybe I don't know if this is a flaw or not, but I don't try to think firing right away. Is it something I'm doing wrong? Yeah. Do I not have the right processes in place, or did I not define this role well enough, and do we need to change something? Or maybe they are suited for something. That maybe they're a great person. They're a lot of times they're working hard. They're trying, but you need to find kind of tweak it a little bit and to help them fit in better or be a better employee. And so maybe, I don't like firing. I don't like firing.
I don't think anybody. I've
had to do it. I don't like it.
Yeah, it's not a good time. It feels terrible, and I really like the idea of just making sure the lines of communication are open between. I feel like it sounds so silly saying this, but I don't think it happens often. Just open lines of communication between management and their employees. There should never really be. It should never really be a surprise of oh, you're not performing well. That's a conversation that should happen,
Yeah, well, right. And because, for me, I try to check in, check in. How is this going for you? How are things going? That's why you have one-on-ones. That's why you have, you try to build. I think the biggest thing for me has been just kind of not looking at them as they're just taking orders and they're just doing stuff for me. To actually build a relationship with them, understand their life, who they are, and that can help you make a decision about how that role looks too, and how you might make it easier for them to work. And because part of our job, I think, is to, whether you're a founder or a business owner, is to create an environment that everyone's comfortable and that a lot of that lays on you, you have to create that environment. It might be you that's the problem. You don't need to fire. maybe you might.
That's very true.
This is great. There's a lot to unpack here in terms of every startup. There's a lot of things we probably dig into. So how is business going? You've been doing what do you call yourself? A consultant? You consult something?
I would say a marketing consultant and strategist is how
I've got to work on the messaging or something.
I need to work on my own messaging and my title, mostly because honestly, it varies for me too, depending on the gig.
You're flexible. Yeah.
I am, maybe to a fault. But Yeah, so business is good. The beginning of this year was weird, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't have a better way to describe it. Weird it was. It was a weird start for startups. There was a lot of strange things that happened with funding. And everyone I've talked to in this space said like the start of 2023 was tough, and it was. But now the end of 2023 has really picked up and been quite nice. And I'm actually in the midst, we're talking about diversifying and not having all of our eggs in one basket. I'm actually in the midst of alpha testing an email marketing course. So I'm going to be rolling out some coursework to kind of diversify my own offering.
An email course. So teaching people how to do direct email or like.
Yeah. So if you're, let's say, a founder, maybe it's just you, or you've got maybe a junior marketer, this will teach you the philosophy, like it's email marketing 101, the philosophy of it, best practices, copy, design. It will teach you which tools you can buy. It comes with templates, comes with swipe files of examples. So
Very
it's
cool.
It's a one-stop shop to get email rolling in your organization.
It's amazing to me. Now, I've been around the web for a couple decades. I used to do a lot of email marketing back in the day. It's amazing to me that it's still a thing. It hasn't gone away. It's still effective, right? Oh
yeah, very. It is so cost effective. I think that's the thing people forget about. And you own your list.
Yeah.
Right? If Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn all went away, you still own your email list.
That's right. Yeah.
So, yep.
Yeah. So let's go build our lists.
Yeah.
Well, it was great. It was great talking to you, Ann. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, they want to find you, are you hanging out in the World Wide Web somewhere? Where's your favorite place? Is that Twitter? Is that LinkedIn? Where is that?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn for sure. You can find me at my website, finmarketingm.com, and I would love to chat with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me. Until next time.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. If you want to comment on this episode's page, provide me with requests on topics for future episodes, or inquire about being a guest, please find your way to thebuilders.fm. You can contact me there or add a comment under these show notes. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you are interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.